Hey everyone, ready to dive into some seriously cool tips for speaking English better? I mean, who doesn't want to sound like a natural, right? We're taking a deep dive today into this guide that claims to have 10, count them 10, methods for boosting your fluency. 10.
10 sounds like a lot, but it's not about overwhelming yourself. It's more like having a toolkit, you know? You pick and choose what works for you at different stages of your journey.
Okay, so like a personalized fluency toolbox.
Yeah.
I like that. I gotta say though, the first method in this guide, it kind of threw me for a loop. It says we should be thinking in English. Is that even possible if you're not already fluent?
It might sound crazy, but there's actually research backing this up. People who make the switch to thinking directly in English tend to become more fluent over time. It's like cutting out the middleman, that translation step that can really slow you down.
So instead of seeing, let's say, a dog and thinking perro in Spanish first, I should aim for dog popping into my head right away.
Exactly. And the guide suggests starting small. Don't try to overhaul your entire thought process overnight. Just begin by labeling things around you in English. Then, as you get more comfortable, you can start narrating your actions, like I'm making coffee, I'm walking to the store, simple stuff.
I can see how that would start to rewire your brain a bit. So once you're thinking more in English, what's the next step? More flashcards.
Flashcards can be helpful, but the guide's method number 2 emphasizes something even more fundamental. Speak every day. And the best part, you don't even need a partner for this.
Wait, so I can just talk to myself and still make progress? Does that make me sound crazy?
Not at all. The guide actually encourages talking to yourself, having those imaginary conversations, practicing speeches in the mirror. It gets those words flowing, builds your confidence, and it's way less pressure than, having a real conversation.
Okay, that takes some pressure off, for sure. But what if I, get stuck, or I want to sound more natural, less like a robot reciting words?
There's a technique called shadowing that the guide highlights. You basically listen to native English speakers. Could be a podcast, a TV show, an audiobook, anything. And then you pause and repeat what you heard. You try to mimic their intonation, their rhythm, even their little pauses and breaths.
I actually tried something like that when I was learning Spanish. I'd repeat lines from my favorite movie over and over, trying to nail the accent. It's amazing how much you pick up without even realizing it.
Right. And it ties in nicely with the next method, which might sound a bit intimidating at first. Ready for it? Surround yourself with English.
Uh-oh. Does that mean I need to book a flight to London right now?
Not necessarily. It's more about creating those little pockets of immersion in your daily life. The guide suggests simple things like switching your phone and app settings to English.
Oh, that's clever. I never thought of that. Suddenly my phone's nagging me in English.
I like it. Exactly. You're navigating your digital world in English, and you're passively absorbing all that vocabulary and those sentence structures without even trying. And of course, there's the classic stuff too, like watching movies and shows, listening to English music.
Basically, turning your daily life into an English playground, soaking it all up. And speaking of soaking things up, method number 4 takes this immersion idea even further. It's called Master the Art of Imitation.
This method taps into how babies learn language. They're not cracking open grammar books, right? They listen, they observe, and they copy.
So I should find my favorite English speaker, someone with an accent I absolutely love, and just try to sound like them. Channel my inner Brit, perhaps.
That's the idea. But it's not about becoming a perfect clone. The guide suggests focusing on specific things like their pronunciation, their rhythm, the way they stress certain words. It's like you're analyzing their speech patterns to unlock their fluency secrets.
That actually reminds me of something I struggled with when I was learning Italian. I'd get so hung up on pronouncing every word perfectly that I'd get tongue-tied and lose my flow. I was so worried about sounding, foolish.
And that's where the next method comes in, like a breath of fresh air. Stop worrying about mistakes.
Wait, hold on. Making mistakes is a good thing now. Tell me more.
Think about it this way. Would you rather speak perfectly but be too afraid to even open your mouth? Or would you rather make a few small errors but actually communicate and have fun doing it?
Good point. I'd much rather be the one stumbling over a few words but having a blast than the silent, perfect speaker in the corner.
Exactly. The guide emphasizes that confidence trumps perfection every time, and those mistakes. They're simply proof that you're learning, that you're pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone.
So it's more about getting your message across than sounding like a dictionary, huh?
Precisely. And that leads us to a method that can really help you sound more natural, more like a native speaker. It's all about learning phrases, not just words.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does learning phrases make such a big difference? Spill the tea.
Well, when you focus on individual words, you often end up stringing them together in a way that might be grammatically correct, but it sounds, well, a bit robotic, like you're reading from a textbook.
So instead of saying, I require hydration, I should just say, I'm thirsty. Way less awkward.
Perfect example. The guide highlights the importance of learning phrases that native speakers actually use. Things like, how's it going? Or hang on a sec, or what's up? These little chunks of language instantly make you sound more fluent and confident.
I get it. It's about capturing those everyday expressions, those little snippets of real conversation that make you sound less like, a language learning robot.
Exactly. And once you've got a good collection of phrases under your belt, it's time to put them into practice with real people. That's method number 7. Ready for it? Practice with real people.
Okay. No more hiding behind textbooks, huh? It's go time.
That's the spirit. The guide encourages seeking out any and all opportunities to have real-life conversations. It could be finding a language partner online, joining an English conversation group, or even just chatting with English-speaking friends or colleagues.
I remember when I was learning French, I joined a conversation group at a local cafe. It was terrifying at first, like truly terrifying. But you know what? It was the absolute best way to get over that fear of speaking out loud and making mistakes.
It's amazing how those real-life interactions, even the slightly awkward ones, are where the magic happens. It's where the language comes alive. You start making those connections and you start to realize that, hey, I can actually do this.
Absolutely. It makes it all feel way more real.
Yeah.
And I bet it also helps you get used to different accents and speeds of speaking, which, let's be honest, can be a challenge in English. It's like everyone's speaking a different language sometimes.
You're so right. And that's a perfect segue to method number 8, which addresses that head on. Are you ready? It's time to train your ears for fast English.
I'll admit, sometimes when I hear native English speakers talking, it feels like they're speaking at warp speed. My brain just can't keep up.
It can be overwhelming, for sure. But the guide reassures us that it's a skill that you can train. They recommend starting with slower-paced English podcasts. Maybe check out the BBC or Voice of America. They tend to be a bit clearer and slower. And then you can gradually work your way up to faster content like movies and interviews.
So it's like building up your listening endurance, like training for a listening marathon.
Exactly. It's like anything else, the more you practice, the stronger those listening muscles get. And the guide also suggests not just passively listening, but actively engaging with what you're hearing. Try repeating phrases, jotting down new words, even shadowing the speaker like we talked about earlier.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's like taking it from passive listening to active learning, really making those connections in your brain.
Exactly. It's all about experimenting and finding those strategies that click for you. Now, while listening is crucial, pronunciation is also a key part of fluency. And the guide has a surprisingly simple method for that. It's called the 1-1-1 pronunciation rule.
Okay, color me intrigued. Lay it on me. What's the 1-1-1 all about?
It's all about breaking down pronunciation practice into bite-sized chunks. First, you focus on one word at a time, really nailing the sounds and the stress, like really get into it.
So instead of trying to pronounce a whole sentence perfectly, I should master one word at a time, like be the master of that one word, and then move on.
You got it. Once you feel confident with that word, you move on to practicing it within one sentence. Make sure it flows naturally.
So it's like building blocks, starting with that foundation and then gradually making more complex structures.
That's a great way to put it. And then finally, you can try using that word in a full conversation without overthinking it. Just let it flow.
So it's a gradual progression from isolated pronunciation to natural usage. I like that. It seems way less intimidating than trying to conquer a whole sentence all at once.
It's all about those small wins. Now, we've covered a lot of ground here, and you might be wondering, how do I keep all of this straight? How do I stay motivated and actually put these methods into practice? Well, that's where our final method comes in. Drum roll, please. It's time to set a fluency challenge.
Oh, a challenge. Okay, you've got my attention. What kind of challenge are we talking about here? Is this like a speak English for 24 hours straight kind of thing?
Nothing quite that extreme. The guide emphasizes that consistency is key, so it encourages you to set realistic goals that fit your life and your learning style. It could be something as simple as committing to speaking English for, say, 10 minutes every day. Or maybe you take on a 30-day challenge where you fully immerse yourself in English as much as you can.
Okay, I love the idea of having a specific goal to work towards. It definitely helps with motivation, makes it all feel a bit more, structured. Plus, who doesn't love a good challenge?
Exactly. And the beauty of a challenge is that you can tailor it to your own interests and needs. If you're a movie buff, maybe your challenge is to watch a certain number of English films with subtitles each week. If you're a bookworm, maybe you challenge yourself to read a chapter of an English novel every day. It's all about making it work for you.
It's like turning your fluency goals into a fun game. And I think that's a great note to end on for now.
I agree. We've covered so much ground already, from rewiring our brains to think in English to setting those fluency challenges and everything in between.
It's amazing how many practical tools this guide has packed in. I'm feeling inspired to, actually put some of this stuff into practice.
That's fantastic. The key is to pick the methods that resonate with you, that speak to your learning style, and just start experimenting.
And don't be afraid to get creative and adapt those methods to fit your needs.
Exactly. Now, before we move on to the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a chance to think about which of those fluency methods really sparked your interest. The one that made you think, haha, I need to try that.
It's always so fascinating to see which methods click with different people. Some folks might be all about that immersion, while others might love the pronunciation rule or maybe the challenge idea.
Totally. And remember, you don't have to tackle all 10 methods at once. It's not about overwhelming yourself, right? The guide actually suggests focusing on one or two at a time and really mastering them before you move on.
It's like building a house. You wouldn't try to put up all the walls at the same time, would you? You lay a strong foundation and then build up from there, brick by brick.
I love that analogy. So if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, don't worry. Just pick one method that feels right for you and make it your fluency focus for the week. Experiment, play around, see what happens.
Speaking of experimenting, I actually had a question about something we discussed earlier. We talked about surrounding yourself with English, but what if you don't have easy access to, English speakers or English media? What then?
Ooh, that's a great question. I actually faced a similar challenge when I was learning Japanese. I was living in a small town where finding Japanese resources was like mission impossible. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack.
So what did you do? Did you give up on Japanese?
Definitely not. I got creative. I started listening to Japanese music and podcasts online. I watched Japanese films with subtitles. I even joined an online forum for Japanese learners. I basically created my own little Japanese world, even though I was miles away from Japan.
That's awesome. You basically built your own immersion environment. It shows that with a little ingenuity, you can find ways to surround yourself with English, no matter where you are.
Exactly. And, speaking of aha moments, I had one myself recently while I was revisiting the learn phrases, not just words method.
Oh, tell me more. I love a good aha moment.
Well, I was watching this British comedy show, and I noticed how often the characters use the phrase, Bob's your uncle. It's such a classic British saying, and there you have it, or it's as simple as that.
I love that phrase. It's so quirky and fun to say, and it just rolls off the tongue so naturally.
Right. And it struck me that learning those kinds of idiomatic phrases, those little nuggets of language that are unique to a culture, they not only make you sound more natural, but also give you a deeper understanding of the culture behind the language.
It's like unlocking a secret code, like you're gaining access to a whole new level of understanding. And it makes you appreciate the richness and the humor of the language even more.
Absolutely. It's like you're not just learning words, you're learning the soul of the language.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And, it also highlights the importance of finding those authentic materials and resources for your learning, stuff that native speakers actually use and enjoy.
Authentic materials? What do you mean by that? Should I be ditching my textbooks and flashcards?
Yeah. Not necessarily ditching them, but definitely expanding your horizons. It's about going beyond those traditional learning materials and immersing yourself in the kinds of things that native English speakers actually consume.
So instead of reading a textbook dialogue about ordering food at a restaurant, I should watch a real cooking show or listen to a podcast about food.
Now you're getting it. That way you're exposed to natural language, slang, humor, cultural nuances, all that good stuff that you might not find in a textbook.
Okay, I'm sold. It's like getting a backstage pass to the real English language, the way it's actually spoken and used in everyday life.
Exactly. And, it's also a fantastic way to train your ears for fast English, which we talked about earlier.
Oh yeah, that whole warp speed talking thing, it can be a real challenge.
It can be, but the more you expose yourself to authentic English, the more your brain starts to adapt. It's like you're training your brain to process those sounds more efficiently.
It's like those brain training games, but for English.
Exactly. And that same principle applies to practicing with real people.
Ah, yes. The real-life conversations. The ultimate fluency test.
They can be a bit nerve-wracking, especially when you're not feeling super confident. But the guide encourages us to embrace those moments of discomfort because that's where the real growth happens. It's like pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone and realizing, hey, I can actually do this.
I totally get that. I remember when I first started practicing Spanish with a language partner, I was so nervous I could barely string a sentence together. I felt like I was back in high school, fumbling through a presentation.
I've been there. But you know what? The more you practice, the easier it gets. And those moments of awkwardness, they actually become kind of funny in retrospect. Like you look back and think, wow, I can't believe I used to be so nervous about that.
It's true. It's all part of the journey. And I think it's important to celebrate those small victories along the way, like conquering a tricky grammar rule or finally understanding a fast-paced conversation.
Absolutely. Every conversation, every new word you learn, every time you understand a bit more of that warp speed English, those are all milestones worth celebrating.
They're all stepping stones on the path to fluency.
Exactly. And speaking of celebrating, I think it's important to acknowledge the effort and dedication that goes into language learning. It's not always easy, but it's incredibly rewarding.
So true. It takes patience, perseverance, and a willingness to embrace those moments of, imperfection.
But the payoff is huge. Being able to communicate in another language opens up a whole new world of possibilities. It allows you to connect with people from different cultures, experience new things, and expand your horizons in ways you never thought possible.
It's like you're unlocking a whole new dimension of life. It's a journey of self-discovery and growth.
Now, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want you to consider something. How has your perception of fluency changed since we started this conversation?
That's a great question to ponder. Have you discovered any new strategies that you're excited to try? Have you gained a fresh perspective on the challenges and rewards of language learning? Take a moment to reflect on those questions as we take a short break. We'll be right back to continue our exploration of English fluency.
Welcome back, everyone. It's amazing how much we've uncovered in this deep dive into English fluency. From thinking in English to setting fluency challenges and even, embracing those inevitable mistakes along the way.
It's been quite the journey. And, I've been so impressed by your insights and your own personal experiences with language learning.
Well, I've always been kind of fascinated by languages. And I've definitely had my share of stumbles and triumphs along the way, like we all have. But that's what makes it so enriching, right?
Absolutely. It's like this ongoing learning experience. It's a journey of self-discovery and, even personal growth. And one thing that's really stood out to me throughout our conversation is this idea of finding joy in the process. Mm-hmm. Oh, totally. It shouldn't feel like a chore or some kind of burden,
Yeah.
It's got to be fun. It's about finding those aspects of language learning that make you curious, that make you want to keep going and keep exploring.
Exactly. Like whether it's connecting with a language partner, watching a hilarious English comedy show, or finally mastering that, tricky pronunciation that's been bugging you forever. Those are the moments that make it all worthwhile. Those moments of joy and accomplishment, and they really fuel our motivation and keep us going.
Absolutely. It's like a little reward system for your brain.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a challenge to, embrace that joy of language learning.
I love that. What does this challenge involve?
It's pretty simple. For the next week, I challenge you to find one aspect of English learning that brings you genuine joy.
That could be anything, really. Listening to your favorite English song, or maybe reading a captivating novel, having a conversation with a language partner, or even just trying out a new tongue twister,
Exactly. The point is to find that one activity that makes you smile. The one that sparks your enthusiasm and reminds you why you started on this language learning adventure in the first place.
And, we'd love to hear what you discover. Share your joyful discoveries with us. Tell us what brings you joy in your English learning journey.
We're all ears. Yeah. So until next time, happy English learning. May your journey be filled with joy, laughter, and of course, fluency.